All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be starting this webinar now. And so today is basically a mini webinar on many different things pertaining to the topic of mobility. But before that, we have as always, some announcements to keep everybody in the loop. Rokas cannot seem to hear anything. Might be an audio issue. Check the settings there. The first thing that we want to announce, and I'm sure will get people excited, is that in the House of Fire, Yasir just had a baby. Congratulations to Yasir. Chris Chamberlain.
Congrats, man.
Chris Chamberlain, I know that you and your lovely wife are soon to be expecting as well. And DJ, show him your wrist.
It sounds like we need to have a birth control course unit over here. But I want to let you guys know, birth control is not always 100%, as you can see right there.
That's right, guys. Sensei Fuego is officially Papi Fuego. So give him a round of applause for that. DJ will soon to be a father, and he's happy about it, I think. Yeah, tell him how you feel, DJ.
It feels just like another day, to be honest. I'm sure it'll hit me soon. Maybe 2 years from now.
Potentially 2 years from now when he's on the compound or in the castle. Ben says he's already scared of that child.
Oh, you should see the mobility on this kid. Segway.
His joints are so malleable right now, so neuroplastic. But yes, DJ is officially a father. We withheld the news. I did my best to keep that a secret until this day. So congrats, DJ. We're very proud of you, and we won't be joining you anytime soon, John and I, on the path to fatherhood.
Yeah, watch out. That's what I said 9 months ago.
But yes, moving on. Jigwe is going to take his flying trapeze class this Saturday. Really hyped and excited about that. So be on the lookout for some footage. I think he'll survive. I think he'll make it. So he should be good there. Joel will be starting online coaching with John. John is very selective and waitlist people because he's a meanie. But he decided to move Joel up on that list. So hopefully Joel has a good experience with him on that endeavor. Last but not least, before we move on, some of you may be curious as to what we're doing, what we're working on as headmasters. So this is one of the most exciting avenues that we're excited to introduce. That sounds redundant, but it's true. And what we plan on doing, releasing soon, are releasing online educational courses for people who are not involved in the project to get a glimpse of what it is that we're doing inside. So we'll be releasing, for example, a task-oriented training unit. It'll contain an ebook, the tasks that we have, some other new things, summaries, et cetera, for people who want in on OMU but aren't willing yet to jump in. And so that course will serve as that kind of platform for that. And Ben, your question there, can we promote these? This is a really, really good question because we want to provide the opportunity and the conditions for people involved in OMU to not only move better, move more, and have the education behind it as to know the why, the intent, and the how, but also related to things outside of just the body and movement. So one of the things that we're looking forward to implementing is providing you, the members of OMU, an opportunity to promote these as an affiliate or as a partner, whatever you want to call it, basically, to understand that if this is something that you would love to promote, that you can earn money off of that and spread the joy of what we're doing inside OMU to everyone. but also that there are many creative ways that we can implement this as well. So one of the things that Ian Cunningham, the crouching or crotching tiger, depending on where you're from, inside the OMU community, suggested to us and that we were already thinking about is starting a community fund where we really take care of each other, either in-house or intra-house, where if someone can't pay the tuition fee or the enrollment fee for OMU, we all chip in a little bit to help make sure that they can stay in for at least another month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it may be. And so we're thinking that this might be a way to do that. So maybe if you elect to do so, and by all means, we're not forcing you to become affiliates of OMU. We're not proselytizing you to proselytize other people. That's called an MLM. But essentially, if you elect to, then you'd be able to help promote these on your own networks and channels, and you would get a certain percentage back from all the sales that you made. And you can also elect to put this towards a certain community fund inside the house. So House of Win members can have their own little community fund if you want to do that. We can also do that ad hoc as well. There's no need for the online courses or bundles to be super tight with that. But the potential opportunity, imagine like just like a regular university or a high school where we're raising money for a charity or something like that. And we say to people, hey, 10, 20, 30% of all the profit made from this will be going to this specific charity for the month or for the season or for the semester or whatever it is. And so this is an exciting, not only business opportunity, but a way for us to do some really good work in the world. And so if you guys can kind of picture what I'm saying, what it would essentially look like is you can become an affiliate and start selling these on your own to people. You can use that as a way to contribute to a community fund together where we can support in-house stuff. We can also use that as a way to support things way outside of OMU in the project that we may not have been able to influence or affect before. So things like charity work, fundraising, local community initiatives, you name it, all of that stuff. So this is just one of the things that we're currently working on as headmasters is A, really nailing down the product, and B, making sure that the members who are involved in the project can thrive off of it. So I was saying this last night in my Instagram story, but some members inside the group have been asking about business and money and marketing, whether they should do this or that or pursue this course or this degree and certification and whatnot. And the main one that people think that they need is an MBA. And I don't have an MBA. I started learning this about a year ago. And so the only MBA I know, this is the joke, the only MBA I know of or that I want is a massive bank account. So if you guys think that you need a degree or a certification or anything to begin promoting these or promoting your own products, then please believe that you don't need that. Believe that you can do it on your own, and that we will try our best to equip you with the tools to do so. So I know that many of you have jobs. So think about how great it would be just to have like an extra $300 or $600 in side income in addition to your work that you're already doing. Or if you're an independent personal trainer or a coach online, think about how you would be able to implement that into your training or implement that as an upsell or an add-on to what it is that you're already doing. Providing more value to people that people want and are willing to pay for, instead of thinking about it like this whole salesy, sleazy kind of thing, which is what we tend to think of. But it can be done in a way that is both ethical and in the way that you want to do your business. So it doesn't have to be the way that it doesn't have to be sleazy, basically.
Well, guys, John, Housefire is going to use a multi-level marketing model to sell. But if you're in my downline, you're going to get exclusive calls. We're going to have little task parties that you could invite your friends to. We'll drink some wine. It'll be fun. but I'm at the top of the pyramid.
Always. Papi Fuego is always at the top of the pyramid. Matt asks, how do these new courses benefit us other than affiliate opportunities? We'll be adding new stuff into the courses. And so already as a member of OMU, you'll be having access to that. And the courses are just one way for us to both advance and diversify what we're doing inside OMU. That being said, there's also some new shit that we're coming up with for exclusively for the OMU members. So stay tuned for that as well. But we just wanted to introduce this option and idea to people who are willing to partake in it, and just for you to know really what it is that we're working on right now. So if you have any suggestions, comments, et cetera, then you can always feel free to reach out to us as well on that.
Yeah, think about it like this, guys. This package we're going to put out is like Girl Scout cookies, and we're the Girl Scouts. So we're going to use that funds to do some cool shit in the group. It's going to help.
Yeah. This isn't including all the other stuff that we're going to do. Right, DJ? We're going to have, everyone knows this already inside OMU. We're going to have cloaks. We're going to have robes. We're going to have merch, singlets, maybe. Kettlebell heads of the headmasters and other members.
I think we should invest into contraception. Foolproof contraception. OMU contraception.
OMU sterilization.
And that's the way you feel about parenthood, man. I don't know. So Ben says, this is great. I have friends who have asked me to join for project material and content, but don't want to join. Yeah, so this is a way for people who you know or people in your network who, if they don't want to join the project because they find it really too culty for them, but they want to participate in what it is that we're doing, you can say, hey, we have this thing here. And so there's many opportunities here to grow. But that's one of the things that we're super excited about. And just to give you a preview of what we're doing, most units, if not most units that we'll be doing will come with a course component with it as well. So this will be exciting for not only OMU, but for the members as well. So again, charity work, a community fund, and you'll get access to everything as well. So woohoo for being an OMU member. Thanks for staying with us, guys. Are those all the announcements? I believe those are all the announcements I have on my end, I think. DJ, John, anything else?
I'll do a little something. Just going over the Hunters webinar last week, which is great. If you guys haven't checked that out, go give it a listen. But we're wondering if anyone had any questions about that, anything specific that you're wondering about mobility in general. If you wanted to ask Mirth, John, or me, or something about the past webinar, about the FRC principles, about the cars, which everyone should be doing every day, right? Every damn day, do your cars. So we're just interested in what you guys think.
So there was one question that was brought up in the Slack chat, and this will cover two things. One is for those who don't know, Slack is our quick message way of establishing a forum. So if you're not on that and you're not using it actively, it can be difficult on mobile, on using it on your phone. But using it on your desktop, in my experience, has been a whole lot smoother and seamless. So if you want to use it on your desktop and try that out, if you haven't already, just type in imoveminati.slack.com and you should be able to log in and try that on your computer. I find it to be much more seamless in that way. So the second part of the question is Donovan in my house, the winged soldier. He asked, how do you guys train mobility? And specifically, how do you train your clients' mobility? Through assessment, how do you program it, things of that nature. And John and DJ might be a better better fit answer for that, because what I teach in terms of movement is slightly different.
Yeah, I think we all take different approaches, so that'll be interesting to hear.
You want to go first, DJ?
Okie dokie. So my approach to mobility, and this might tie into assessment, which I think is big. So once I have an individual come in, I'll do the CARS assessment. So just look at their articulation, the joints. Any deficiencies, we'll isolate that. I kind of go a little bit further than FRC. I like Julian Pinau's definition of mobility, which is range of motion that you can maintain a torque in, going back to joint torques. So that means not just actively being able to achieve a position, which we would say is mobility and not passive flexibility, but also being able to control torque in that position. So you'll see a lot of people who could do, say, the middle splits, but if you have them do a light deadlift, they automatically fall into one rotation, really torque in their joint. So I think that's how I attack mobility, kind of with that strength component in mind. Can you control forces in that range of motion?
I like that definition. Sounds like a good strategy. Yeah, I go about it pretty much the same way. I try to figure out if they have any sort of deficiency. But the most important assessment is the most important assessment is the questions that you ask your client, in my opinion, because we can look at look at the capability of a joint as much as we want to, but at the end of the day, variability in my opinion will not count as much as the choices that you make. Because a lot of the theories around mobility is that you should have more options in one joint when you perform a certain type of movement, which I can agree with, because in that way we get to manage the stressors that we impose upon a joint. At the same time, what will have the greatest influence on you? Is it the options that you have, or is it the choices that you make? No amount of shoulder flexion will help you if you stress your shoulder too much, or if you stress your shoulder the same way every time, with the same exercise every time. It won't matter if you are not able to recover from the work that you're doing. So I think that we need to have a personal or a more human assessment as well, where we simply ask them, do you feel like you have any deficiency? And why is that happening? What kind of movement choices are you taking? Not only what kind of movement options do you have? We can make a person more aware of their options, which automatically will probably make them take different choices than the ones they've taken in the past. And it's always good to have, a bit more resources so that you can move in different ways. But I think simply working on resources without focusing on how you consciously choose to apply them, I think that we're going to fall into a rabbit hole that where we're always on the path to improvement because we feel like we're lacking a resource, instead of actually choosing to investigate how we choose to apply those resources.
Yeah, for me, I like to ask what that person thinks about mobility. If they're coming to me with specific questions in regards to mobility, then obviously there seems to be a disconnect between what they think and where they think they need to go, right? So they want to move from this point to this point. That applies to business as much as it does to movement, by the way. But the questions that I always ask is not only having assess them for what it is that they want to do, but really their experience in moving the specific joint in question. For example, if someone says, and this is something that I sometimes see at gyms where some people will do an assessment, aka a sales process, to trick people into thinking that they are deficient when they've just haven't done that before in recent memory. A good example of this is just this motion, right? So if you ask someone who's more desk jockey bound, it'll be likely much more difficult for them to maintain this without compensating somewhere else in the body. And is that a deficiency, or is that just something that they've just haven't done in a long time that their body doesn't recognize? If you guys were doing the CARS assessment, think about how your fingers move when you're doing the intrinsic foot strengthening portion, where you're moving the big toe and then moving it down, and then the last 4 toes and moving that down, and how your fingers move with that. It's because our brain is very neuroplastic and is trying to make new connections by gathering new data and new information. And so if we forget that, then we might be gearing ourselves towards thinking that a human body is optimal in this position when every human being is biomechanically likely to be different. And so the way that I like to approach mobility training is start first by let's fully try to understand where this person is coming from, where they're coming in. They don't care about thoracic extension, that term specifically, because they have no experience with that specific term, if that makes sense. So it's good to introduce and inform and educate people. It's a really good idea. But we also have to understand where people are at so that we can meet them on their level. They do come to coaches like everyone else here, or people who are more interested in this field for your expertise, for your knowledge. But they also they might come in with little understanding or more understanding than you. So it all depends on that ratio, I suppose, is how I would approach it.
Misha just asked me if I could demonstrate an exercise with you guys. So if you guys are ready, I would like you all to follow me, just so we get to, it's just an example of how movement assessments can be very fallible. So if you all just follow me with your left hand, give me a thumbs up. Everyone, thank you. And now with your right hand, point with your index finger. Wonderful. All right. So on the count of 3, I would like your thumb and your index finger to trade places. All right. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Once more. Just one for show. 1, 2, 3. A bit faster. 1, 2, 3. Again. 1, 2, 3. Faster. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Good, and relax. Now, the reason why you felt like a paraplegic seal on land when you performed this movement is not because you lack the mobility to do it. It's not because you don't have the active flexibility to perform the task, or that your finger flexors aren't strong enough. It's because you don't know how to do it. It's you haven't trained the skill yet. And this applies to any kind of movement. This doesn't only apply to switching thumb and index finger. It applies to absolutely every single movement that you're doing, like with your neck, or maybe a squat, or a push-up, or a back flip. And this is where we kind of go into the topic of movement assessments, is that assessing a person and looking at any kind of movement, irregardless of how many variables or lack thereof a movement includes, the first thing that you have to acknowledge is that the movement that you are observing is not only a result of their physiological capacities. Any movement that you observe and assess is a result of an entire person's life experience or a lack thereof. So if a person hasn't performed a movement before and you choose to assess it, that's kind of like asking them, hey, do you like music? And then they say yes. And then you say, show me. And you throw a cello at their face. And you expect them to learn and know how to play it. No, just because they like music doesn't mean that you're supposed to know how to play a cello. And furthermore, movement assessments are fallible in the sense that, do they work? There are not too many studies that have been done on movement assessments, but there is one movement assessment that, just 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, was incredibly popular. It was popularized by the physiotherapist Gray Cook, and the movement assessment is called a functional movement screen. Yes, classic overhead squat assessment, Ben Carey. Now, the cool thing that when something becomes really popular, like the functional movement screen, that's when you actually can start to investigate it and see whether or not it is a good assessment. And they've done a lot of really interesting and funny studies on the FMS screen. And most of the conclusions end up with the people in FMS to say FML, because they basically show that everything they're trying to prove with FMS, they fail totally. As an example, what do you think, and I want you guys to answer now in the chat, what do you think will have more profound impact on how a person moves? That they're going to get injured or that they have been injured? Answer. Right. Have been, going, more. Give me more. Have been injured. Have been. Good. Now, the functional movement screen, the primary purpose of it is to see whether or not a person is going to be injured. But interestingly enough, the functional movement screen fails at looking at whether or not a person has been injured. So let me see if I can find this study. Yes, this is a study from the British Journal of Sports Medicine, 2006.
How you just have this fucking pulled up, you're just...
Oh, no. You should see my tabs, Jonathan. This is a critical review called Why Screening Tests to Predict Injury Do Not Work and Probably Never Will. It is a beautiful piece of literature. But the interesting thing here is that the functional movement screen failed to see that a person or several people in the study had an injury in the previous 6 months. So how the actual fuck are they able to predict that a person is going to get an injury? Furthermore, in the functional movement screen, they did a study on a bunch of soccer players, and they give them a score, either a good score or a bad score, to predict injury. And in the study, more people who got a good score had an increased chance of getting an injury. So they proved the opposite. They got the opposite of what they were trying to prove, which was if you're getting a good score, then you're going to have less injuries. And it's very difficult to understand, why would a person who scores really well in these tests have an increased chance of getting an injury? And that's where we come into movement choices. What you actually choose to do. Because let's say that you have the idea that your body needs to move in a very particular way, which means that you're going to make fewer choices. you have less options because you perceive that your body is supposed to move in a particular way. Your joints are supposed to articulate in a particular way. Whether it happens consciously or subconsciously, narrowing the options that you have in movement when you are moving will make you move in a more specific manner. And I want you guys to do one more thing with me. One more not so, more practical movement assessment. So take out your left arm like this. Good. All right, now with your right hand, I want you to start hitting like just at the top of your wrist like this. So just apply a bit of force. Okay, so we're doing okay, but you can gradually feel that it's becoming more and more painful. So hey, let me correct your movement and say to you, move your hand 5 centimeters up. Ah, that feels better. It feels a lot better. Oh man, that feels so good. But if we continue, we're probably going to notice that it's not that comfortable. So let's move our hand 5 centimeters up. Feels so much better. Ah, you have fixed me. You have corrected my movement pattern, I think. But if we were to continue, the same kind of uncomfortable sensation would arise again. And why is that? Well, because you are stressing your tissues in a particular way. And if you choose to stress them in a particular way, i.e., you think that you have to move in a functional manner, irregardless of your physiological status, irregardless of the physical resources that you have, if you choose to stress your tissues or the same tissues in the same way every day, then you are going to get an injury or some sort of pain. Ian, have a good day. Rant over. Thank you.
So
That's awesome, man. And another thing, if you guys are wondering about why you can't assess movement, check out dynamic systems theory. No one can tell you from a movement what's wrong or that even your movement is wrong. It's just we're too complex to do that. And things like FMS and even the finger thing, we're talking about joint coordination more than joint mobility. So yeah, like FMS, taking a global screen like that and getting a 1, 2, or 3, that's just a number. It doesn't tell you what's wrong. There's too many pieces in place there, and it might just be the coordination of the movement. So it might say there's a problem, but it's not going to tell you how to fix it or what to do. And like John was saying, statistically, looks like you're more prone to injury. So that's a slippery slope to go down. Saying there's a right way to move in general is, but especially those movement screens and telling people that they're injury prone. So that's awesome.
yeah.
It is pure and utter bullshit.
So you can tell our shared headmaster perspective on certain approaches in mobility, and why it's not only kind but also really wise to, for just a second, absolve our judgment, our imposition of morality onto our movement. So instead of thinking that our joint isn't functioning or is deficient in some possible capacity, that we understand in what context specifically are we applying this joint and this motion, and in what scenario is it better or not. So for instance, in the breaking community or capoeira community, which is very similar, how can you say someone is moving right or wrong? You know, how can you say that this person needs X amount of mobility for this purpose? Most people who do these things just fall into it without a care, and they still do it. Of course, they might be more, perhaps, that there might be a greater chance of injury cost, so to speak, primarily based on the activity that we're placing ourselves in, gymnastics, parkour, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But our concept of mobility extends way beyond that. So the current popular approach, and this is a question that might be a good one to ask the community, is what do people agree on merely by convention or popularity, and what is the truth? can we find a truth here? And that's a question that everyone will have to discover on their own. So,
yeah, I think that it is essential that when we, when we start to play around with new concepts or ideas about mobility, then we have to ask better questions. That's the most important thing, especially in regards to like assessments, because what are we actually trying to predict and what are we actually assessing? And what we're assessing as a human being, we've kind of confirmed that. But what are we actually assessing? What are we actually trying to predict? That is the interesting part. Because, and this kind of ties into what we have talked about in the House of Water for the previous week. We're still going to continue this talk this week, which is my favorite topic. It is the difference between injury and pain.
Big one.
It is a huge and incredibly important topic, because a lot of the times when we, most of the times when people don't do, once people start to do something they previously haven't done, or they start to do something they don't really like, it is because something worse has happened. Right? That is the usual approach. If you start to do something that you haven't thought about doing, or you didn't want to do it, it's because you have had a traumatic experience, something that is stopping you from doing the things that you really want to do. An example of that would be, to start working on some kind of resource like mobility. Like you suddenly start working on that resource because you probably experienced some kind of discomfort. Perhaps it is pain. And this is a super interesting topic, but yes, Ben, relatable. Yeah, like, come on, guys. How many times when we start to do something that we perceive as important, but we don't like it, when does that usually happen? Well, it happens after something shitty has happened. And the desperation that we feel post shitty traumatic incidents, it makes us, start to look for answers. We don't really question what's happened. And here's where the difference between pain and injury comes in. Because a lot of the times when we experience some kind of pain, we assume that it's because there's something wrong with our body. So we need to be able to function better. We need to be able to articulate better. Maybe there's something that's tight. Maybe something is loose. Maybe we think something is way too active or deactivated. Or maybe the way that we've moved has been faulty.
Did you say activated or deactivated?
Yeah. I love this when people say, my glutes aren't activated enough. I'm not like, girl or boy, if your glutes were deactivated, you would not be standing up right now. I just want a bit of a side note here. Misha came up with a book recommendation right here, A Guide to Better Movement, The Science and Practice of Moving with More Skill and Less Pain by Todd Hargrove. This book is amazing. If you want to, it's an easy, short read, and it's an amazing introduction to the science of pain. But back to the topic at hand. Pain is more complex than simply assuming that something is physically wrong with you. How much time do we have, Jonathan? I might go on a really long rant here now, so you have to stop me.
For all future notes regarding pain science and John's perspective on pain, you can reference the Mental Jiu-Jitsu podcast, specifically at minute 51. Basically, the last 10 minutes of our episode together, John goes into this topic and gives a really great intro to it. But in short and brief, we tend to associate pain with injury, but there are cases where you experience pain and there's no injury. And likewise, there are cases when you experience injury but no pain. And so pain science itself is a very difficult subject to really simplify and narrow down in certain vocabulary and certain terminology in the way that we conventionally think about things. So it's important to consider that and put that into consideration. Like if we think about emotional hurt, is that related to a physical restriction, a physical harm? It might lead to that, and there might be some correlation there. But we need to move beyond just seeing pain as a result of a broken arm or a broken finger or a deactivated or unactivated muscle. And just being,
yeah, guys. Oh, sorry. But just real quick, think about the phantom limb syndrome. When someone's missing a limb and they have pain there, and they do the therapy like with a mirror, the other limb, and have them do work with it. Just that perceived action where that limb used to be decreases the pain. So it lets you know it's all up here in the brain, first of all, not so much where it is in the body, but that's all connected with perception, right?
Yeah, and I think that like oftentimes when we talk about pain science and the fact that you can have abnormalities but no symptoms, a lot of people assume that we're just trying to nuance pain just a tiny bit. Like we're just adding one more shade of gray to this really bad book about pain. But the pendulum is still so far towards the far right in this case, where we only focus on the biomechanics. Like it will take us, I think, maybe like 50, 100 years until we're coming into a more balanced view on pain. Because you can, pain is so much more influenced by other things than your physical status. Just to try to, Jonathan, go.
Well, we're getting hype. We're getting hype on this because for those who aren't in the know and those who aren't in the industry or profession, so to speak, this is a really radical thought. Like imagine that this is radical in the community. Think about that. That what we're talking about right now is still very, very, no other word for it, radical in the community. That's all I wanted to say.
You're radical, man.
You're so sweet. You've become too soft now that you became dad, DJ. Your estrogen levels are just through the roof.
They're as high as they've ever been right now.
But just to give you guys a couple of examples, like on how much, how many more things can attribute can contribute to pain than the physical status. Imagine as if the OMU community consisted of 1,211 participants. So we're all over 1,000 participants in this community. If we did an MRI of your cervical spine, then 87.6% of you would have a bulging disc in your spine, but you wouldn't have any symptoms. The same thing if we assume that the OMU community consisted of 710 participants, 86 to 88% of you would have an abnormality or a pathology in your knee. You would have osteophytes, you would have cartilage damage, you would have bone marrow edemas, but you wouldn't have any symptoms. And that we can say the same thing for the hips. We can say it in the shoulder as well. Like assuming that we were all over the age of 40, then 96 of you would have a shoulder abnormality. You would have a acromioclavicular joint arthritis. You would have supraspinatus tendinosis. You would have partial thickness tear of the bursal side of the supraspinatus tendon.
I love it when you talk like that.
I know you do. That's how I make babies. But none of you would have any symptoms. So these are pathologies. These are things that you can find in an MRI or a CT scan, and you can go, that's not the way that joint is supposed to look like. But yet you would have no symptoms. And why is that? Well, it's because there are way more elements, or let's call it dimensions, to pain. So when we're doing an assessment, a movement assessment, and we assume that just because your joint is moving like this, then you're going to experience pain, that is pure and utter bullshit.
So that's a very long but methodical answer to Donovan's question, which is how do you program mobility into your client's training? I'm not quite sure we actually got there, but
no, that hit a lot of other questions. I think we had one asking about our personal past injuries.
Oh God, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that might be a long one.
Yeah. to keep it short, this ankle of mine here has been broken like 4 times, 5 times, due to a lot of things. So that's one thing there. I've been diagnosed with sciatica. One of my legs is like 1 inch longer than the other. I only talk with one side of my face. So I mean, there's a whole list of things, and yeah, those are just some of my injuries, sort of.
My left testicle is a good inch lower than my right one. This lady just looked at her. Oh.
She wanted it, man.
But yeah, dude, I've all the way head to toe. Ankles, sprained ankles. I actually frayed meniscus, completely torn PCL. No longer PCL on my left knee. Torn psoas, allegedly one of the most important muscles in the body, they say. That's fucked on me. Slip disc, shoulder surgery, everything. I'm surprised I'm walking around. And 5 years ago, I couldn't squat past a quarter squat pretty much with weight. I was one of those guys. So I've came a long way after having all these injuries. So it's not a death sentence.
No, it's not. And if you feel like your injuries are preventing you in any capacity, then it is wise to go make sure that you get that checked. Your experience with pain and injury, whatever that relationship may be, pathological, spiritual, emotional, et cetera, with people you trust. First of all, there's a lot of wankers out there, but yeah, we've all been there. I don't think anyone can say that they've been injury proof, or that they're somehow magically, like, nothing has been hurt or in pain or in injury, anything. So we're with you on that. In other words, we're not infallible human beings. We are very fallible, and our experience of it is more common than is quite conventionally thought.
Misha asked what happened to my face. Well, that's actually a serious story. Your mom squirts like that dinosaur in Jurassic Park with the acid. So they should put a warning label on that thing.
Guys, DJ had like 30 minutes of sleep last night. Don't. This is not his normal. This is not him normally.
Remember that dinosaur and the thing goes like this and it and it spits that thing?
You're not fit to be a father.
I'm worried. I am worried. Sheldon's listening at work on a speaker. That would injure my heart right there. That would send my adrenaline super high. But yeah, I hope that answers a bit of your question, Sheldon. Our experience of pain and injury has been similar to many other people inside the community as well.
We like, there's this popular way of saying it that you can bulletproof your body, or you can bulletproof your shoulders or your hips. You can't. The only thing you can really learn is to not stand in the line of fire. And that's when we need to ask these questions. We need to figure out what's actually going on. Instead of only trying to improve one quality because we assume that that quality is the thing that's going to reduce pain or injury, then first we have to understand what is pain and what is injury.
Good job, Joel. I like that. I like what you said there. We all have a shared ear injury of listening to DJ's mom jokes. Has anyone ever, I mean, most people in this community, maybe, I don't know, but the nocebo effect is a real thing. So whoever wants to do some research on that, that is a thing that affects people. So just like a placebo, it's a nocebo. So do some research into that.
And it's pretty much impossible to get a placebo without getting a nocebo. And just to clarify for those of you who haven't heard of a nocebo is the opposite of a placebo effect. So where you think like meaning response, the meaning behind a placebo is that something positive will happen. So you get a positive response. Same thing for a nocebo, only the opposite. You expect that there's a negative meaning to what's happening. And so you create a negative response. And imagine all the nocebos that are out there right now saying that, hey, if you smash this muscle, particularly your psoas, with a trigger point therapy ball, and you put a kettlebell on top and you kind of soften out that psoas, that will relieve pain. It's going to relieve pain. I can promise you that much. But now you have a new problem, because before someone gave you this specific solution, you didn't know that you have that specific problem. So all of a sudden you have a new problem, which is, oh man, I have to loosen up my psoas. And before they gave you that solution, you didn't know that A, that you had a psoas, and B, that it could be loosened up, which it can't because it's too strong. So like every specific solution will give you a specific problem. And imagine the amount of solutions that we have right now. We live in an age where we've never had as many specific solutions available to us as we do right now, which implies that we've never had as many specific problems as we do right now. So yeah, there are a bunch of placebo products out there, but for every single one of them, you'll get a nocebo product as well. Something that makes you fearful, something that will make you anticipate a negative consequence of what's going on. So we have to be very careful when we listen to specific advice, because the more specific they are, the more they're going to pinpoint out one flaw.
And guys, if that psoas injury, sorry, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that psoas injury I was talking about personally was right after listening to some Supple Leopard tell me to smash the shit out of my psoas with a lacrosse ball. So yeah, I'm one of those people.
I'm so sorry, DJ. I'm so sorry.
I have to learn the hard way. It's the only way.
It's a very difficult topic to unpack, because specifically the work that many of you guys will be doing is not adding on things, it's undoing what people already believe to be true. So there's a lot of work to be done out there, but don't lose hope. Believe that you can.
And let's give people some hope and maybe something, a light they could look forward to. The mobility work we were going over last week, the cars especially, which is just kind of exploration, if anything, not a fix. If we look into the science of pain and we think of the body maps we have, which is what our brain knows we can move in the external space, right? What we have control over and can go. So say the spine and the low back, places we never really see and kind of chunked together. So if you think of the homunculus, that part of the brain with like the big lips and hands, that we, it controls the motor control pretty much. These spaces we have pain, people have a lot of pain, such as the low back and spine. They're devoted very tiny amount of space, which means our control of that is limited. So when we're doing cars or working on spinal, increasing our body's awareness of that part of your body in space. So we have a better map of it, and we have more confidence of it, and we have more control. So things like cars and things like the homework we're doing may lead to less pain. That's a path. It's not a cure. It's not a fix, but the more control, the better.
And on that subject, referencing back to our past unit of task-oriented training, some of you reported great results without having done what it is that you were specifically doing. So you'll find that sometimes when you're doing the tasks or the homework, that your symptoms of pain or injury will go away, so to speak, while not specifically working on that specific problem. And so if we're looking at body maps, referencing the body maps that DJ is talking about, gathering new information is our body's way of understanding new input. And we typically understand things as a form of output. My body is outputting pain. But we can think about it and experience it in much more nuanced ways. And that conceptualization on its own may lead us onto a different path. So thanks for bringing it up, DJ.
Just being aware, if we look at any kind of rehabilitation objectively, any kind, usually the movement that you're doing is not associated with a huge threat. It is associated with something that is supposed to be pleasant. It can be heavy. You can feel like you're doing work, but there is not as much discomfort in those movements as when you're usually moving. That is like the core premise of rehab. Calm shit down. But because of the lack of discomfort and that you're being told that this is a positive movement for you, there will also be less stress associated with the movement. And basically you get to experience movement as a positive input and not a lack of a positive output that you're supposed to create. So they've done crazy studies where they compare activities that are drastically different. Like for lower back pain, they compared stationary bike riding with Pilates. Two very different interventions. And the outcome of these two different interventions for lower back pain, they were the same. There was no difference. People rehabilitated as fast with riding their bikes or by doing specific core and back related and hip and shoulder related Pilates exercises. Now we can start to argue about which type of activity will yield better results. But the main lesson from that study is that if you allow your body to calm down and then just build it gradually up, just by proving to it that, hey, you can do work, then that is what's going to eliminate the pain. Not that you're doing a specific type of work or not that you're fixing anything, but that it is capable of doing work. Because the body doesn't work, it isn't able to observe everything in isolation. It also looks at its capabilities systemically, not isolated. So if you're in pain, then do something that is comfortable, but where you can push yourself and where there's no negative stress related to the movement. Unfortunately, most of the times now when we rehabilitate, we're trying to impose negative associations by telling people what's wrong with them.
Okay. So that's the headmaster rant on mobility and a lot of bullshit in the world. But if you have any other questions, please let us know. Um, so Matt, okay, so I've been wondering about this for a while. I've been shadowing a physio for a couple months, and they assign only comfortable movements. They completely ignore the principle of specificity that Hunter spoke of. For example, when someone tears the ACL, they assign the patient to do trunk rotations. Depending on the physiotherapist, first of all, who you're shadowing on, and their experience of it, they may disagree with us completely, you know. And we also have some physiotherapists inside the community as well who we can reference.
I mean, it may be completely bullshit, but there may be a clever explanation as to why they're doing it. We can't really know without understanding who the individual is. And I'm not only talking about their bodies and at which point in the timeline of injury they're at, but also who the person is. But yeah, doing trunk rotations when there's a ACL tear, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because if the ACL tear has led to the individual moving less generally, then the first thing that you want to do is to make sure that they move. I mean, even if a person has an ankle injury, making them move their shoulder or making them move anything at all is the priority. And I really like this quote by, was it Greg Lehman? Which was, treat the donut, not the hole. Many times when there's a specific injury, then we think that we have to treat it specifically. So if there's a rotator cuff tear, then we have to work on the rotator cuff or the scapula because that facilitates the movement of the shoulder or something like that. Or if there's a scapula problem, then that will, create problems in the thoracic spine, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that when we treat the hole in the donut, I'm not going to talk about holes too much, DJ, but the priority is that the area gets to calm down. And we can calm down the area in many different ways. We can calm it down psychologically, we can calm it down socially, and we can calm it down biomechanically. Physically, or physiologically, the way we would calm down an area is to, give the body work. The body needs work to calm down. If we leave a person at bed rest and they don't move at all, then that's going to cause havoc in their body. The body needs stress to recover. So by doing trunk rotations, at least they're doing something. At least they're making the individual move in such a way that it keeps their body, let's call it, circulated. There's something happening there. So that's one thing. We need to calm the area down. The other thing that can make the area calm down is by giving it time. And sometimes we don't want to stress a body part more than what is necessary so that it is allowed to recover and that it gets the time that it needs to recover. The third, and perhaps one of the most important ways of allowing a body part to calm down, is to ensure that all the other body parts that contribute to the movements that are meaningful and relevant to the individual are strengthened. So take an ACL tear as an example. Let's look at tendinosis, that there's some kind of injury to the tendon, the patellar tendon. If you do any kind of rehab to that patellar tendon, whether it be specific or general, after maybe like a 2 or 3 month intervention, if you look at the patellar tendon again, it hasn't healed yet. That takes a shitload of time. I got this scar right here like 4 weeks ago. It's going to take time for the body area that has been inflicted or traumatized to recover to its not natural state, but to a stronger state. So if you do any kind of rehab, whether it's calf raises, or if it is leg extensions, or if it's squats, or it's lunges, or it's riding your bike, or it's simply doing kickbacks, if you strengthen the area around the injured body part, that will allow that body part to rest more because it's doing a bit less work because you are compensating. So compensations can be awesome in regards to calming down and allowing a body part to build itself back up. Because if you compensate, if you're stronger in other body parts, then the insulted body part can rest a bit more. So how will trunk rotations like improve a torn ACL? I don't know. That depends on the individual and what they're currently doing and what their activities in daily life are. But there's a rehab of a specific body part doesn't necessarily have to include that specific body part. As long as the body is becoming stronger and more resilient, and you move in such a way that the body part is able to calm down, then that is priority number one, especially in the acute phases of rehabilitation.
Can I add to that, John? You were talking about the rotator cuff specifically. When people injure or have a rotator cuff injury, you see in classical PT, they get on those bands and they're just doing internal, external rotation to work on that rotator cuff and strengthen it back up. And then they throw them back into these movements or exercises that hurt them. No one ever really thinks about the big ass pec and lat that they probably weren't utilizing during, like, say, an overhead movement where the rotator cuff was the only players in the game stabilizing and making that shit happen. When there's small stabilizer muscles, we forget about just, getting strong in these, I think we should do more pec work. But exactly what John was saying, we take these little things that were probably overstressed and we rehab the shit out of them and try to throw them back in the game for the same thing to happen again. So yeah, I feel you on that.
No, exactly. That is that's so well put. It's so interesting to see how many people love these small muscles, and the more convoluted and mysterious these muscles are, and the smaller they are, the more we are convinced that they play a significant role. But they're small muscles for a reason, and big muscles are big muscles for a reason. The only bad thing about big muscles is that most people have heard of them before, so they trivialize their importance.
We need more bodybuilding.
Yeah, but bodybuilding is
rehab.
Is rehab. Bodybuilding is, for me, I think it's one of the most functional ways of moving, because if we're going to look at functionality, well, then we're looking at skill-specific stuff. But other than skill-specific stuff, having a larger cross-sectional area of a muscle that is able to produce more torque over a joint is really freaking functional.
I don't know, man. I think we just need to learn how to activate our muscles more. We need to turn them from deactivated to reactivated. I think that's the solution.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that's an extended look into our heads when we're talking about mobility things, or things related to mobility in question. But now we turn it over to you with some questions that, and we don't want to take anyone else's more time. You guys all have things to do. But if you could just chime in on the Facebook group or in the Slack chat about your own story progression of mobility, how you've come to the, let's say, momentary conclusions about your own body and the way that you train other people, if you are a trainer. If not, then that's fine too. But share some of that. Share how your journey has been. For example, in my house, there's a particular member who sent me a message about how a particular client came in, and at first they were very stressed. They didn't feel as though they could move. They had to use a walker to get out of a car. But over time, their approach changed into just to see why you. It's not an excuse. But they were saying how the way that their eyes look when they look at movement now is different, completely different, and the way that they just the feeling of it is completely different. So, in short, share some of your journey in the group as well, and more than us, perhaps it's going to be more helpful to someone else in the community who might have needed to hear that particular story that really resonated or they identified with, because we all have stories to share. And that involves pain, that involves injury, that involves what we call mobility, and all things functional, sexy, activated, deactivated, psoas, rotator cuff, so on and so forth. Yeah. The birds chirping, that's a great segue.
Stop noceboing us, Smurf. Yeah.
Mental jujitsu.
Well, I could also try to summarize, just try to make it as short as I can, my approach to mobility. And it's all about one thing, and that is intent. Any movement can be a mobility exercise. That depends upon your intent. So when you pick an exercise that you want to do, then you simply have to be able to choose, am I doing this with the intent of being able to load my body more? Am I doing this with the intent of being able to perform it more times, either for an extended period of time or a shorter period of time? Or am I doing this movement to increase the range of movement or motion in the movement? For me, like when I do a deadlift is a mobility exercise. It's just that week 1, I focus more on increasing the load, and week 2, I focus more on increasing the range of motion. And when I increase the range of motion, then I back off on the load, which is very clever unless you're DJ who never backs off on the load.
DJ's loads.
My intent is torque.
Internal or external?
It depends what part of the...
Stop treating the whole. Once you treat the whole, you internally, don't you?
When we switch to the externals, when we have the orgasm, as we know. But, you stay in internal as long as you can.
The
Pledge of allegiance in your head.
The idea of who I am as a professional is just gradually changing for every webinar.
Who even are we? Really?
I'm glad I could discredit this establishment.
But yes, everybody. We intended on this being a mini webinar, but it came to be a full-on head-on webinar. So thank you for sharing your time with us. If there are no more questions, then we can go ahead and let everyone get on with their day. But any last thoughts, DJ, John?
A couple of people have asked me like if they can join in on the stuff that we have done in the House of Water when we be talking about pain. I will be doing Red Cross for Melissa. I will do mini webinar on it. So after I've talked to and given all these mini webinars in the Slack group to the Super House of Moistness, I'll do a mini webinar on it. It'll be very laid back, very informal. But I'll try to summarize everything that we've talked about.
So, yeah, we're going to combine that with some topics that we're talking about in the House of Wind as well, which is how do you teach? How do you learn to teach? How do you learn how to convey information or content? So, House of Fire, I think y'all are still debating about like potato bits or something, what the hottest substance in the universe.
Hot Pockets. Hot Pockets are bagel bites, man. We had an in-house poll.
But yes, if there's any other, well, we do have a lot of other stuff planned in the works, don't get us wrong. But if you guys have any suggestions on topics that you want to personally talk about, then we would love to know what that is. We have a great resource at our disposal here, which is the people inside the community. So we have physiotherapists, we have cirque dancers, we have incredible trainers. We have people who don't even do this for a living, but are so into it and know more than a lot of other trainers, admittedly. So, please, I know that there are a lot of discussions in between members. So keep that up and do that more. We have plenty of great people to resource from here. Anything else?
I haven't slept in over 24 hours, so I think I'm gonna go.
All right, everybody. I think that's it for today. Please have a wonderful, great day. As my high school principal used to say, make it a good day. The choice is yours. So.
Oh, I was homeschooled. All right. See you guys later. Have a good day.
Yes,
Talk to you soon.
peace.